This short film has been made from writings taken from the late Ben Bailey's Memoirs. From its close proximity to the Channel ports, Deal and the Downs always played an important part in the history of continental wars. The declaration of war was made on Sunday in 1939 by the officiating officer when many were in the church. At 11:15 a.m. the first air raid warning went off. This turned out to be a British plane which was mistaken for the enemy. Until the German offensive on France in 1940, life in Deal and on the beach went on much as normal, except for the elaborate ARP work which was going on. From Deal's point of view, the most interesting phase of the war was when, before the fall of France, the Downs was crowded with shipping of every maritime nation except German. Luxurious Dutch liners with towering white decks glistened in the noonday sun and reflected the subdued light of sunset. It was obvious that with up to 170 vessels in the Downs, casualties from collision and floating mines were inevitable. In many ways, the sight of such vessels at anchor repositioned Deal's part in the war. The growing number of Dutch vessels, some solid-looking craft, made a good account of themselves when they took refuge in the Downs. Some were fighting side by side with our own fleet. Once again, during the war, the Boatman of Deal offered their boats and services to help with the evacuation of Dunkirk. The skill of the boatmen could be referred to the year of 1799, when the embarkation of an expedition across the North Sea to Helder took place. As many as 5,000 troops were taken by Deal luggers, in bad weather and with high seas running. The boatmen offered their boats and services free to the king. Later in the same year, around 100 Deal boats crossed the North Sea again, in boats no bigger than the first-class lugger, to bring the troops back. After the fall of France, the enemy batteries ensured that the Downs was at no time a safe anchorage. Deal was proclaimed a contraband control base. The subsequent demolition of Deal Pier left nothing to arrest the eye but the grim sight of submerged masts from the many ships that had found their fate in the Downs. Almost overnight, the Downs, recently so full of animation, a throbbing centre of interest to so many motorists and people, was transformed into a depressing scene of desolation. There were occasions when convoys, escorted by destroyers and protected by up to 20 balloons, passed through the Downs. It was then that the batteries opened up. Dive bombers contested their laboured progress, but our own fighters were never far away. When invasion seemed imminent, preparations were undertaken. Steel girders were driven into the parades and beach. The seafront was a tangled mess of barbed wire. Sea approaches were mined, and pyramid-shaped concrete blocks were used as barricades. The upper part of King Street was a maze of these dragon's teeth, as they were called. A later addition was the trellis work of steel tubing placed at the water's edge, and at intervals along the foreshore were concealed petrol tanks from which petrol could be pumped. These were to be ignited if an invasion ever happened. The Downs and foreshore was studded with various other devices to intercept invading forces. 6-inch guns on trains occupied camouflaged emplacements to the south of Deal Castle, as well as Sandown and Kingsdown. The heavier motorboats that had been engaged in lots of rescues and salvage work when the Downs was crowded were removed from the beach. Some of them changed ownership when faced with a period of afforded idleness. Gaps were made in the defences to enable the smaller craft to launch during the fishing season. This kept a good supply of food coming in, which was well needed. People were encouraged to leave the town. It ended an era of depression. Deal was initially a reception area, but the stupidity of such a move was soon realised, and many local school children were evacuated to South Wales. Deal was badly scoured by tip and run bomber raids, and in 1942 raids were occurring daily. Spitfires would systematically patrol the shores in pairs. One fine afternoon on June the 2nd, 1942, two Spitfires collided while they were circling a wreck off Deal. They were never found, and the men were never seen again. The Maratta was a common wreck for target practice. Ben joined up at Dover and ended up during the first months of the war on a ship in Calais, where he helped the rescue of hundreds of men during the Dunkirk evacuation. From here he went on to Lowestoft, where he was eventually trained and served on minesweepers. Again, Ben has written down numerous accounts of his life and times during the war, stories that would take far too long to convert into film. I'd like to thank Ben Bailey's daughter Coral for giving her kind permission to publish Ben's memoirs.